If you've been feeling like everything costs more lately, you're not imagining it. And land is no different. Let's talk about that today. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Land Buyer's Guide. I'm your host, Scott Thomas, owner of landparker.com, where we help everyday people get onto a piece of rural land with affordable owner financing. Really glad you're here today because we're getting into something that affects every single person thinking about buying land right now, and that's inflation. So let's just dig in. You've probably noticed it at the grocery store, at the gas pump. If you've priced out lumber or fencing recently, you definitely noticed it there. Inflation is basically just prices going up across the board over time, and when that happens, your dollar doesn't stretch as far as it used to. That part most people understand. But here's what a lot of people don't realize. Inflation actually has a pretty interesting relationship with land. And depending on where you're at in your land buying journey, that relationship can work for you or against you. So it's worth understanding. Land is a physical, finite asset. There's only so much of it. Nobody's out there manufacturing new acres. And because of that scarcity, land has historically been what a lot of people call a hedge against inflation, meaning when the dollar loses value, land tends to hold its value or even go up. That's one of the reasons people have always looked at land as a solid long-term investment, especially during uncertain economic times. Now, when inflation climbs, a few different forces start pushing land prices higher. The first one is just the cost of doing anything with land. Building materials, fencing, drilling a well, clearing a road, all of that gets more expensive during inflationary periods. And when it costs more to develop land, the value of land that's already been improved goes up. It kind of pulls everything upward. The second thing is demand for what people call tangible assets. When folks start losing confidence in financial markets or the value of paper currency, they start moving toward real physical things, real estate, precious metals, land. That increased demand naturally pushes prices up too. And then there's the agricultural side of it. Rural land that has timber, water rights, good soil, farming potential. That stuff becomes even more valuable when food prices and commodity prices rise, which, again, tends to happen during inflationary cycles. So land with real, usable resources becomes more attractive. Now, interest rates. This one's worth touching on. Central banks typically raise interest rates to try to cool inflation down. And yeah, that makes borrowing more expensive. But here's the thing. Rural land often behaves a little differently than the traditional housing market when rates go up. A lot of rural land buyers are paying cash or they're using seller financing. So they're somewhat insulated from those rate hikes. It's one of the reasons the rural land market doesn't always move in lockstep with what you see in residential real estate. And honestly, for a lot of the people listening to this show, homesteaders, off-grid folks, people who just want a quiet piece of land to call their own, inflation has actually made the case for buying land feel stronger, not weaker. When inflation is squeezing your budget every single month, the idea of growing your own food, having your own water source, reducing your dependence on expensive systems, that becomes really appealing, and a lot of people are acting on that. So competition for rural parcels, especially ones with water, decent soil, and road access has picked up. Places that used to be considered too remote are getting a second look, and that's worth knowing as you're out there searching. So what does all this mean if you're actively looking for land right now? A few things come to mind. First, think about what the land can actually do for you, not just what the market says it's worth today. A parcel with a reliable water source or good growing soil has real, practical value that goes beyond any market fluctuation. To focus on what that land provides over the long haul. Second, if you're planning on making any improvements after you buy, a well, fencing, a road, any kind of structure, it's worth getting some cost estimates before you finalize your budget. Material and labor costs are elevated right now, and you don't want to close on something and then get surprised by what it costs to make it livable. Third, think carefully about financing. If you're going through a traditional lender, understand how current interest rates affect your total cost over time. Seller financing, which is something we offer at Land Parker, can be a really flexible option for raw land. Terms are often more accessible than what you'd get from a bank, and you don't need perfect credit to get started. Fourth, if you're finding that popular markets near cities or vacation areas feel out of reach, that's actually pretty common right now. Those areas tend to see the sharpest price jumps during inflation. Exploring less trafficked rural regions can sometimes turn up really good value. You're not sacrificing quality necessarily, you're just looking in places that haven't been bid up as aggressively. And fifth, don't count out smaller parcels. If larger acreage feels like a stretch right now, a smaller piece of land with solid fundamentals can still give you a productive homestead, a place to get started, and a way to build equity over time. You don't have to go big right out of the gate. Now, a question I hear a lot is it even a good idea to buy land when inflation is this high? And I want to be straight with you about this because I think the honest answer is more nuanced than a simple yes or no. Land doesn't depreciate the way a truck or a piece of equipment does. It doesn't go obsolete. For homesteaders and off-grid buyers especially, a lot of the value isn't even financial. It's about security, it's about freedom, it's about resilience. A piece of land where you can grow food, collect water, and live more independently has a kind of value that inflation genuinely can't touch. That said, being thoughtful still matters. Rushing into any purchase without doing your homework, regardless of what the market is doing, is worth avoiding. Take your time. Research what you're buying. Make sure the numbers make sense for your situation. A few practical things that can protect you in any market. If there's no recent survey on the property, it might be worth getting one done so you know exactly what you're buying, and there are no boundary surprises later. Look into property taxes for the county you're buying in, because they vary a lot and they can add up, especially as assessed values rise with inflation. Ask whether there are any easements or whether mineral rights are included or severed. That affects what you can do with the land and its long-term value. If at all possible, visit the property in different seasons. Road access that looks fine in the summer can be a completely different story in the spring. And water drainage, soil conditions, those things can look really different depending on when you're there. Talk to people in the area too. Neighbors, locals, they often know things about that land that you just won't find in a listing description. Here's the bottom line on all of this. Inflation does have a real impact on land values. That's just the reality. But it doesn't have to derail your goals. For rural buyers, homesteaders, and off-grid folks, land is still one of the most durable, tangible assets you can own. The key is going in with realistic expectations, a clear picture of the costs involved, and a focus on what that land can provide for you over time, not just what it costs today. With the right approach, finding the right piece of land is absolutely within reach, even right now. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks so much for spending some time with me. If you're ready to start exploring what's out there, head over to landparker.com. We've got a great selection of rural vacant land across the country, and we make it easy to get started with owner financing. Sometimes as low as $100 down and $100 a month. No bank, no hassle, just land. Check us out at landparker.com and find your piece of land today.